Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. I'm Maya Soman. I'm here with Bhante Sudaso and Ayavata. And tonight we will be looking at rare things to be found in the world. So we can start with Namo Tassa and then read from both Bhante Sujato's translation as well as Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, a few words of Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namassami. Alright, so we'll be reading from Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Twos, Sutta 121. So the sutta reads, these two people are hard to... No, actually, I think we got the wrong one, sorry. It's
108.
119, since it's rare things, apparently. These two people are rare in the world. What two? One who takes the initiative and one who is grateful and thankful. These are the two people who are rare in the world. Then 120 says, these two people are rare in the world. What two? One who is satisfied and one who satisfies others. These are the two people who are rare in the world. Okay, so we can read maybe also from Venerable Bodhi's translation to have another insight on what this could mean. So Venerable Bodhi says, these two kinds of persons are rare in the world. What two? One who takes the initiative in helping others and one who is grateful and thankful. These two kinds of people are rare in the world. And the second one is, these two kinds of persons are rare in the world. What two? One who is satisfied and one who provides satisfaction. These two kinds of persons are rare in the world. Venerable Sudaso, would you like to comment?
Well, first off, I'm just noting that it appears that in Bhante Bodhi's translation, he's added an extra phrase, which I don't know if he's getting that from the commentaries or maybe from another edition of the text. Because in the text it just says, Yocha. Can you scroll down, please?
Yes.
It says, Yocha Pubbakari. So Pubbakari, Pubba means first, and Kari means doer, or act, like one who takes action. So Pubbakari just means acting, one who acts first, one who does something first. So it doesn't necessarily mean taking initiative and helping others. I'm wondering why Bhante Bodhi added the phrase helping others here. But I do find it notable here that the Buddha does say that those who take initiative are rare. Those who act first. So most people are followers. They follow what others are doing rather than being the first to do something, or the ones who jump at an opportunity. And then actually there's a connection here, and that the second one being about being grateful and thankful. Well, actually, if we think about the people who do act first, the people who do take opportunities and do things, well, those are the ones who change the world in ways that we can be grateful for. So I'm thinking of my preceptor who took the initiative in opening monasteries and training monks, and as a result, I'm grateful to him because I've had the opportunity to be at that monastery and become a monk. So those are a couple of thoughts that come immediately to mind. So maybe if one of you wants to say some words on this first verse here.
Yeah, the first verse, actually, now that I'm reading it after your comment on it, I'm thinking, comes to mind is actually that sometimes we can be leaning towards one or the other, and then actually being a little bit failing with one or the other, not failing, but missing on one or the other. And so maybe we can have a bit of an initiative in doing things, but while we're on the path, and also not being grateful for what others are doing, and actually maybe taking it a little bit for granted and expecting more, and therefore not being thankful. Or one can be very grateful about receiving a lot of things, and maybe not taking the initiative of actually providing. Maybe also the body seems like it's kind of like a bit of a relationship, so maybe that's also why there's the addition of helping others in the way that there's a kind of exchange, I guess, of things between folks. Maybe that is a little bit what comes to mind. But yeah, in particular, I'm thinking about the gratitude, how rare it is to actually be grateful for what one has. And these days that we actually even have a lot of material things, it's even more rare, paradoxically, to be grateful for it. And in fact, it just creates this big sort of empty spot where we keep fueling. We have more and more, we're more and more empty. The more full we are, the more empty we are, and the more we want, right? And so there's this constant thirst and craving for new experiences, for new things. And therefore also for maybe other people that are very kind to us on a regular basis, very thoughtful. Then we are like, well, that you haven't done that other thing. Yeah, we just take it very much for granted. So this is what comes to mind.
Actually, just had another thought now that you're talking. Also with so one who takes the initiative, one who does it first, and then being grateful and thankful. Actually, I think there's also a connection here, in addition to the one I mentioned earlier, which is that sometimes those who do take the initiative, those who do act first, then can become resentful towards those who come after. So forgetting to also practice gratitude, to cultivate gratitude and appreciation for what others are doing, gratitude and appreciation for the opportunities that one has, gratitude and appreciation for the fact that one had the opportunity to take the initiative, the opportunity to act first, that one had the conditions which made that possible. So also watching out for the mind, which is like, well, I took the initiative, I acted first, but these ungrateful wretches are just sucking the life out of me. And so building up that resentment and hostility instead of cultivating gratitude within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And on Pubakari, I'm actually thinking I might have a better sense as to why Bhante Bodhi said initiative in helping others. I remembered that elsewhere in the Pali Canon, when the Buddha is talking about the qualities of a good attendant, one of the qualities of a good attendant is Pubakari. So that might be where the idea comes from, of being one who acts promptly or takes initiative or acts first in helping others. It might be because it's a quality of an attendant.
Yes, and actually, Venerable Bhatta, you probably saw his hand. He highlighted actually in the Pali dictionary. So it's who Pubakari, the definition says, who helps before being asked. So that's something, now that you were mentioning about the also upataking, that's very much when one is doing service, being on the lookout, right? Before someone is asking you, actually really good upatak, basically, it's very silent, right? You actually have everything that you need without having to ask or to say. And the hardest thing, sort of the worst thing that one should do when upataking is can I help you with something? Right, paradoxically. So it's then the person actually has to think about, oh, how do I get this person to make merit? Oh, actually, I can do everything by myself, right? I don't need anything. but instead someone who has that sense of initiative. Yeah, it's actually something that one needs to cultivate, which is quite rare. And I think it's also connected, probably that's why it's in segue here, with the second verse of being satisfied and satisfying other. So what comes to mind is obviously actually Santussako, Chasubaru-chan, like I'm thinking about in the Metta Sutta, right? So that's Santussako, like being, just content with what one has, with what the conditions are, and also being a good burden. I very much like that connotation of not being a burden. Sometimes we get to be like, oh, I don't want to bother anyone, but actually like being a good burden for both our spiritual companions and for the lay people. And so creating these conditions for people to learn how to take the initiative, and for us to take the initiative, and then also to practice gratefulness and thankfulness, and then also satisfying others. So being there to make sure that others are content, and it's quite rare to find that in the world, but also in our internal world, to see it ourselves, where if we're actually there, or we're constantly looking for more. And maybe Venerable Banda, since
Well, I think that Venerable, you've already said quite a lot on the topic, so it'd be hard to add too much of value. But I think that maybe one thing that comes to mind in addition, I think, is the quality of maybe taking initiative, of helping before. And I think, of course, the main idea here would be specifically with others, as was mentioned, with, for example, taking care of someone. And so, for example, say that you're nursing someone, or say that you're helping someone who's sick. And when you are, like, let's say that they're in bed, and you notice that, oh, their drinking water is out. So instead of having to wait for them to say, like, oh, could you get me some more water? Because one, it's uncomfortable sometimes. Some people, they don't actually want to ask. So one thing Venerable someone mentioned, may I help you? And one thing that comes to mind for me is that sometimes, posing the question is like, oh, may I help you? Or, oh, would you like some help? It almost implies to some people, they don't want to say like that they would like help. They would, maybe if you offered like directly to take something, to help with something, then that would be different. But if you just open it like, may I help you? Would you like help? Then actually they don't necessarily want to say that. So instead you might just go ahead and take the initiative, right, and offer more water, and then they might accept it because it's being offered to them. So that sense of taking initiative, or like seeing like, oh, they might need to be, something needs to be changed, they need to be changed, or the bed needs to be changed, or they need to be rolled, or the lights need to be dimmer or brighter, or they'd like to read a book, so maybe bring so there's many things that you can check that without being asked, or I should say that if you have to be asked, then there's a lot that might be missed. And there's also many things that someone might not actually know they would benefit from, but by taking that initiative, then you can find those things. And so that's one thing that comes to mind. But another thing that comes to mind to me with the taking initiative and so on is also when we're on our own. One thing that I've teaching that I found helpful is the Buddha talks about the quality of appamada. And appamada could be translated, for example, as heedlessness or negligence or carelessness, or also could be explained as a sort of dull or blind indulgence in what's presented to us. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is related to the idea of gratefulness. So when we are negligent, essentially it means that we don't take initiative. And when we're negligent, we also don't recognize what we have and what others have done for us, because we sort of are just indulging in what's happening, what's before our senses. And so one thing that can be helpful to counter negligence is actually to actively go out of your way to do more. So for example, like a basic example in a worldly sense, which then translates into our spiritual life, is sometimes I'll catch myself, like, let's say I'm cleaning my room, or doing some sweeping or something. Sometimes I'll notice in my mind like, oh, this is good enough. So then often, if I catch that, then I'll try to say, well, no. If I think that just, this is good enough, then when I'm meditating, then a little bit of defilement, well, then I'll think that's good enough also. Or like, oh, if I think like, oh, just a little bit, and then I can, then I'll think, well, then I'll also build excuses in my mind. So then my mind is getting lazy in terms of taking care of things that are difficult to take care of. Like maybe it's we don't want to do certain things. Well, we also don't want to go against our desires, right? That's kind of the definition of a desire, is that we want something. So to go against desires, we have to do things that we don't want to do. And so to me, the idea of like taking initiative of doing things, seeing an opportunity, and engaging in that opportunity as a way to counter negligence, counter turning a blind eye towards what could be done more, counter like turning a blind eye to difficult things that we know we should do, but because of the pleasant stupor of not, the pleasant stupor of indulging in our life as it currently is, that negligence quality, that heedlessness quality, that not recognizing the danger, not recognizing the benefits of actively cultivating a mind which is energetic and alert, then because we don't I should say, if we don't recognize the dangers of that, then we won't act out of it. But if we actively counter it, even in worldly ways, then when it comes to our spiritual negligence, also we're used to it. So it's like, well, I didn't want to do that, but I did it anyway. And so then when you're meditating, it's like, well, I don't want to meditate. I don't want to practice sense restraint. I don't want to, not look around. But then you do, because it's like, well, I take initiative. You try to take initiative and see, well, what could I do more here, right? So again, this quality of like, oh, I'm already doing enough, it's already hard enough. Well, no, actually it's not, right? So we can get used to that taking initiative, and that counters negligence. And then similarly, I think the connection to katanyo katavedi, gratefulness and thankfulness, as it's translated by Bhante Sujato. The literal etymology of the words, I don't think it was explained, is kata means what's been done, and katanyo means one who knows, one who recognizes, who knows what's been done. And katavedi similarly means one who knows what's been done, one who understands what's been done. And you could kind of loosely, the etymology is not necessarily 100% clear for the meaning, but you could also translate katavedi as like one who really feels, experiences what's been done. So one way of experiencing the world is not what's been done for us or what we're grateful for, but instead like, oh, for example, let's say that your parents or your friends or your spouse or partner cook you a meal. One way of experiencing it is like, oh, I like this, I don't like this, or it could be like this, it could be like that. And instead, another way of experiencing it is you experience it as an action that's been done for you. It's a totally different experience. And so, for example, as alms mendicants, as Buddhist monks, often that's the way that is helpful to relate to food, just as an example, right? And then similarly for other things. So like as a monk, when we receive food, one way of relating to it is like, oh, I got this, I don't like it. I got that, I do like it. Or I got this, it could be more. I got this, it could be less. This one, I hope I get this, I hope I don't get that. Another way of relating to it is recognizing, oh, they did this merit, they did these good deeds, they went out of their way to do this, they went out of their way to do that, they offered this, they offered that, they supported me like this, they supported me like that. And so you're experiencing the world not through what you like, what you don't like, what you take for granted. You're experiencing it rather in terms of what's been done. So your sensation of the world, your experience of the world is what's been done. And then you recognize, what's been done. And so that's the kind of etymological way that in Pali they talk about gratitude and thankfulness. And so to me, again, that's related to negligence, because negligence, heedlessness, indulgence, blind kind of laziness is when we don't recognize that. Like we don't recognize. So even just the fact that we're human beings, actually we can katanyo katavedi. So what's been done, you had to follow the 5 precepts to be born as a human. So you had to do those 5 things. And so the karma that's been made to have our current experience, that is, we recognize that and be grateful. Like, oh, wow, it's very rare to have this. The good friends we have, like we should be grateful for our good spiritual companions. And we should be grateful for the ways that people help us. We should be grateful for the opportunities that we have to help others as well. So like, for example, today we came across a homeless man who was clearly suffering. And it's very hard for someone who has very little material and mental well-being to help other people. It's very difficult for them to make merit. So the fact that we have the opportunity to do good things as well, even that we can be grateful for. So then you become less negligent, and then you take the initiative. So when we relate to the world as what's been done, then we understand both what other people have done, what we have done, and also what we can do. And then we can take that initiative. So we can have those 2 qualities. And So that quality of negligence in contrast to initiative and gratefulness is what kind of springs to mind for me on these two elements.
Sadhu, thank you for those reflections. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them in or also comments. In the meanwhile, hello to Ku, Maria, Jayanta, Sean, Bhumika, Sud, and just like you know me, who is watching from India. So welcome to all our friends. There don't seem to be any comments or questions, so maybe we could also read another one.
You could.
They're fun.
We went through many.
Actually, the next sutta in the list is a really good one.
Let's see first Bhante Sujato's translation. Okay, these two people are hard to satisfy in the world. What two? One who continually hoards wealth and one who continually wastes wealth. And Venerable Bodhi translated it as one who amasses what he gains and one who squanders what he gains. To say this is one of my favorites, actually. Bhante?
Yeah. Actually, I think this is a really important message here, because it's actually pointing to two very harmful tendencies. And actually, many people have both of these harmful tendencies. But often we lean towards one or the other. So the first one, yocha ladang ladang nikipati. So ladang means something gained or something acquired. So Bhante Bodhi translated that in fact as gains, and Bhante Sujata as wealth. But either way, it means one is constantly stockpiling what you get. So you're not actually using it necessarily. You're not using it, you're not giving it away. Or if you are using it, you're just constantly stockpiling and accumulating more and more. And then the flip side is someone who wastes what they get. So not using it wisely or carefully, but rather letting it go to waste. And the Buddha says that these two people are hard to satisfy. So the person who's constantly hoarding things, well, they're not satisfied because they never have enough. They always have the sense that they need to get more things. And the Buddha also says elsewhere in the suttas that one of the great dangers of having wealth is that when you have things, then you're constantly protecting them and guarding them, and you're constantly worried about losing them and worried that they might get destroyed or stolen. So the more things you have, the more anxiety you have. So the more you amass and accumulate wealth, then the more you amass and accumulate anxiety and fear. And also the person who is constantly wasting what they have. Also, this person is hard to satisfy. So they're constantly wasting, which means they're not really properly enjoying the things that they have. And they're also constantly losing what they have because, again, they're not taking care of it properly. They're not making good use of it. And therefore they lose the use of it through their own negligence and lack of care. So then, of course, the Buddha says that the people easy to satisfy are the ones who don't do this. They don't stockpile. They don't constantly hoard and try to build up their stockpile. But they're also careful not to waste what they have. So instead, using things carefully and thoughtfully. So I'm very interested in hearing what the other venerables have to say on these verses as well.
Yes, these are, some of my favorite verses, but I always say that with everything with in relation to the suttas. But it's particularly interesting to me, right, to find that balance, right? We tend to always veer towards one or the other, and it's difficult to kind of quite get the sort of balance, between them. But to follow up on what actually Bhante was mentioning, the connection also between hoarding wealth and anxiety. I mean, we can see the level of anxiety these days in the West skyrocketing, and the amount of hoarding. skyrocketing. Actually, the more you go west, literally, in the it's interesting, right? Coming back to the United States, I've been in Italy for a while, and there was like more and more stuff, more and more wealth, and more anxiety. And the more we go east, there's a little less and a little less anxiety. And then there are actually places. I remember Bhante Gunaratana sharing how when he had first moved to the United States, Bhante, for those who don't know, is very respected, almost 100 years
He's
old
almost
actually.
100,
Yeah, Sri Lankan
yeah.
monk, the founder of Bhavana Society. And when he had moved to the United States, people were telling him about anxiety, and he had no idea what they were talking about. He was very, very, very confused until he started taking this medication that had side effect anxiety, and then he went, "Oh, this is what people were talking about all these years." Because he started having this experience, this physical experience of anxiety. And of course, anxiety is not just, something that is particular to the modern age, but definitely is, I would say the widespread of it is definitely, I would say, very much connected to that, and to that kind of fear, that sort of like there's never enough, that the more you have, the more you're craving, and the least generous also usually people are. It's quite remarkable how when we go pindapata, when we go alms round, paradoxically, the easiest places where to find food is actually in the sort of more low-income neighborhoods, and the hardest to find food is actually where people are doing quite all right, financially wise, right? Because it's never enough, and then continually wasting wealth or squandering wealth, as Venerable Body has translated it. What comes to mind is that connection to what Venerable Radha was saying earlier. Seeing and knowing the actions that have been done, right? So that connection with being grateful, that connection with being thankful. If I remember correctly, in the suttas, there's a sutta where the Buddha says something along the lines of like, oh, there's this jackal here in front of me. I think this jackal has more gratitude and like thankfulness than this bhikkhu here, this monastic here, right? That one should remember even one, if only one single action has been done for us, we should remember it. We should keep it in mind. We should be grateful, generating that knowing. And so we tend to be quite forgetful, quite negligent, yes, as Venerable was saying earlier, and then that can lead to just not taking care of, not being, just squandering whatever we have gained, whatever is in our hands, and paradoxically maybe thinking that we are very good renunciants, as monastics. Don't need anything, just throw it out. But when we think about it, then actually the amount of effort, for example, if we have something, if we receive something that maybe we don't need, the amount of effort that actually we can put into find a new owner for it, find someone who actually needs it. So instead of throwing food, for example, away, thinking, how can I actually see if there's someone who needs food? As Venerable Bala was mentioning today, we met a beggar who was actually in a lot of need for food in a place where there was an abundance of food. So nobody was seemingly concerned, right, for the well-being of this person, even though there was quite a lot. So we always have the opportunity to look around, and if we have things and we're like grateful about it, thankful about it, we acknowledge it, and then we can share. And and then we're a little bit letting go in a sort of more wholesome way.
One thing that comes to mind to me on this is kind of in the trend of discussing modernity. That nowadays, I think you can kind of see both of these together. That now they have these, I won't name any names, but they have these applications and interfaces where you're both constantly exposed to new content and also constantly moving away from the content. So it's like the continually both hoarding and also throwing. So, right, where like maybe for, I don't know, 5, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, I'm not sure, 30 seconds or something, you can experience something. And so you're constantly amassing experiences, sensory stimulation, information, or entertainment, and at the same time constantly tossing the entertainment because it's also not satisfying you. So never getting satisfied with it. And you also kind of see that in things like nowadays, right? They talk about binging, like binging shows or binging maybe news. I don't know if you say binging news, but yeah, constantly exposing oneself to entertainment, distractions, but at the same time also like constantly moving on to the next thing because it's never actually satisfying. And so I think you can see that move of each of these things, whether you're constantly hoarding, you're moving constantly to the next thing. And if you're constantly wasting, you're also constantly moving to the next thing. Like they're both the same type of movement of the mind where, one example that comes to mind, which is very extreme of constantly wasting is maybe someone who every time they get money, they use it to gamble, to try to get more money. So it's like they're always gambling, or like buying scratch tickets, right? These types of things where you're constantly trying to move on to the next, but at the same time, you're throwing away all the things that you have, but at the same time trying to hoard. So there's like this dual motion where one who's throwing something away, it's like they're trying to get rid of it to move on to the next thing, move on to the next thing, move on to the next thing. And someone who's hoarding also, it's like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And that's interesting, right? If you think of like an extreme case of like a hoarder who maybe they have like 500 bottles of toothpaste in their house because of all the coupons that were available in the magazines. And so they want to stock up, stock up, stock up. So actually they get the pleasure from like the next thing they can buy, the next thing they can buy, the next thing they can buy. They don't actually get any satisfaction from what they have. So someone who's a hoarder, they actually get satisfaction from hoarding, not actually from having, but the hoarding is incredibly unsatisfying. So they're constantly having to buy. And then they're also, as the Venables mentioned, then they're also anxious, right? Because it's like, oh no, I don't know if I can get rid of this and so on. So they're constantly moving on to the next thing and accumulating things is clearly uncomfortable. And then similarly, constantly wasting. So again, like I think probably everyone who is alive and able to watch a video like this has an experience of the modern, things like disposable things, right? The disposability of everything. Like you get something, for example, actually not so long ago, I remember here at the monastery, we needed a heater, like a little heater because it was very cold. And Pandit Sudasa mentioned how they used to make these old heaters, which were made of metal, and they would be very durable. And I was thinking, that's probably not going to be possible to get one of those new because they don't make things that last anymore. Right? They make it so that they run out soon, and then you have to buy another one. And then similarly, like right, certain brands of maybe phones or certain brands of technology or updates or any kind of product that you might buy. It's like they make it of plastic or they make it of material or they make it designed in such a way or they market it in such a way that you constantly have to get the next one. So you're constantly throwing away things. And so maybe you have like a very good phone, and then the next year you throw away that perfectly good phone and you get another one, and you get another one, or whatever it might be. Or it's like, oh, you have a perfectly good thing, but because it's made of plastic and material, so you throw another one. So there's constantly this mindset which is not able to be still and enjoy what's currently present. And then that of course makes it difficult, for example, to meditate, right? Because what is meditation? It's not a technique. It's just simply, can you be free of longing? Can you be free of desire? Can you be free of aversion? Can you purify your mind from the impulses and influences which make it unable to be still, joyful, peaceful, clear? And so this constant moving is restlessness, it is desire, it's aversion, all kind of mixed together in one, as well as remorse, anxiety, and doubt about what to have, what to get. So it's like a bottle of the hindrances rather than stillness and clarity, the awakening factors. It's the opposite of awakening. So I think that it is also an ancient, this is from 2,500 years ago. So we don't need to think like, oh, woe is us, modernity ruined us, and otherwise we would be enlightened if we were born back then. Well, clearly that's not the case. Otherwise these discourses, these texts from thousands of years ago wouldn't be relevant. But we can just reflect how just because it's an ancient text doesn't mean it doesn't apply to our modern situation. And then we can see, well, practically, what would that be? Practically, we could, as the Venerables were saying, maybe we could look at what we do have, and we could see, is this good? So actually, recently, I was talking to someone about a story I heard of a monk, and it was since passed on, but apparently this monk, he was in Sri Lanka, and this was maybe a couple of decades ago, so also probably less economically well off. And apparently at a certain point, maybe in the jungle or something, he was stopped by like very poor robbers, so people who robbed. And so they tried to rob the monk. And also you have to think, like, in a country like Sri Lanka, if people are robbing a monk, a wandering monk, probably they're very desperate, because they would know that that's not acceptable. It's kind of like if in a Catholic country someone killed a priest or something, like, it's very clearly, they know it's religiously very taboo to do that. So to rob from a Buddhist monk, especially one who's wandering around, clearly doing more ascetic practices, that would be really serious. So they would know that as people, even if they weren't Buddhist. And so these robbers, robbed this monk, and apparently they made him take away like all his possessions, including everything except for his lower robe. They put it down with him and then go away into the jungle, and so that he couldn't see them. And then later he came out after they had left, and every single thing he had was scattered around the floor because they didn't want anything he had. Like, he had like everything was so tattered, nothing was of value. He didn't have any sandals. He had like his robes were completely undesirable. His bag was completely undesirable. He didn't have apparently he carried like one rope, which is made of plastic, which is just so bad that no one would really want it. So he didn't have anything that people would want. So no, even these robbers who were willing to rob a monk, they didn't take it. So there's nothing there. And I'm sure that he was very happy, actually. I'm sure that probably he wasn't like lamenting, like, oh, I wish that. So he wasn't wasting things. He wasn't also accumulating things. So that might be a very high standard for someone who, especially if you're a householder and you're listening to this, you might think, well, if someone robbed my house, is there anything that they would want to take? Probably, right? If someone robbed Empty Cloud Monastery, there's a lot of things they could take.
Shush.
Well, if they're into Buddha statues.
You do have a lot of Buddhist statues.
And Buddhist books.
Yeah. But we could always ask ourselves, like, well, me personally, like, you can ask ourselves personally, if robbers were to rob us, are there the things that we're satisfied by, that we're happy with? Is it something that they would really be interested in? And the less that they're interested in, and the more that you're content with that, that's a good sign, probably, that your mind is more and more content with little, easily satisfied.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, excellent. Well, and to segue in that, we'll actually backtrack a little bit to number 118. These two hopes are hard to give up. What two? The hope for wealth and the hope for long life. These are two hopes that are hard to give up.
Yeah. It's actually very cute, because what's translated here as hope for wealth and hope for long life, it's labhasa and jivitasa. So the asa for labha and the asa for jivita. My name is Suddasa. So the hope for purity, which is a much better kind of hope. So hoping to be pure. Hope for wealth and hope for longevity. Just noticing how the mind gets so fixated on pursuing things that are futile, things that are meaningless, things that cannot actually bring true happiness. We generate so much suffering for ourselves pursuing things that are not going to remove our suffering. And it's emphasizing once again the value of contentment. So when we're content with what we already have, then the mind is able to be peaceful right there. It's able to be happy right there. It doesn't. As soon as we stop thinking we need to get something else, then the mind is already happy. So these are really, really good reflections from this sutta here.
Thank you, Bhante. What comes to mind for me is, well, my name is Soma, but
Unrelated.
I would like to be called Nibbanasa. So the aspiration for cessation. Yeah, and yeah, it's just very subtle, right? I like how it says these two hopes are hard to give up, and we can tend to think of wealth, of acquisition, like wealth in terms of like worldly, in a worldly way, but really what we're talking about is literally any type of acquisition, any type of possession. So the cessation of everything, and then also long life. It's like really the cessation of rebirth. It's the cessation of all of this. And sometimes we can get caught up also in very good, beautiful aspirations, and actually that can be very, this sense of hope. Actually, I really like the hope. How he translated it as hope is something that I have been reflecting a lot on, because it does have usually a very positive connotation. But there's this beautiful sutta that I was contemplating a while back, where there is the Buddha that is fully enlightened, and at a certain point he's contemplating, is it possible to actually, be a ruler? I hope I'm not going to butcher the sutta, but anyway, so it's more or less basically the message is to be a ruler that is ethical, that doesn't kill and doesn't let others kill, that doesn't suffer and doesn't make others suffer. And then at a certain point, there's Mara there that is reading the Buddha's mind, and he's like, well, yes, why, Buddha, don't you actually do that? And the Buddha's like, what do you see in me that you are actually suggesting for me to become basically this ethical ruler, this ethical king? He's like, well, you have all of these incredible superpowers. If you just looked at this mountain, you could turn it into gold, and like in a second, instantly. Like, so you could actually, you have all of these great conditions to actually be of benefit to yourself and everyone. And he upon hearing this, the Buddha is like, well, even actually if there was like 2 mountains of gold, or even more than that, basically nothing is satisfying. And whoever knows what is the cause of suffering then understands that it's to be found in acquisition, and acquisition needs to be essentially let go, right? So he refuses, obviously, to take up Mara's suggestion, even though it's very profound to me, at least in the sense of like actually even the sort of best case scenario in samsara, even the sort of perfect ideal case, where we especially these days that if we read the news, there's all of these wars and dreadful news, to think actually that it is possible, it could be possible, even very, very, very rare, right? But this like idea of the wheel turning monarch, the idea that someone like with the conditions of the Buddha, with that pure heart and also his superpowers, so to speak, it could actually create those conditions. Even that needs to be let go. Even that hope needs to be let go. Even any type of gain, any type of acquisition needs to be let go. Any type of existence, craving for existence, needs to be let go. And so this slowly but surely, like training, directing the mind towards that cessation, and directing that mind towards that letting go, directing the mind, towards relinquishing all hope. It's very inspiring to me.
Oh, maybe.
Did
you have something?
Yes.
Okay. Apparently I do. Yeah, well, I think that's very beautiful. Thank you, Venerables. One thing that comes to mind as Venerable Soma just closed is that actually one of the words for an arahant, for an enlightened being, is, or an epithet for them, is niraso, which means hopeless, or has no hope. And actually there's a place in the Dhammapada where the Buddha gives a series of essentially puns, where he talks about how they're hopeless and so on, but he's actually referring to how they don't have any hope for the future, how they don't build their hopes on things. And yeah, it's so strange. Like, not to, maybe this is controversial, but or negative to say, but I don't mean it in a negative way. But you have three virtues in the Western tradition, the Western world, are faith, hope, and love. And so one of them being hope, and the idea being that hope is a virtue because you have hopes for the future. You hope that, the future will be hopeful. It will present you with good things. And in the Christian tradition, they actually say that faith and hope only pertain to the human world, but they pass away in heaven, because you have to have, as a Christian, if someone's a Christian, they have to have faith because they haven't experienced it yet, and they have to have hope because, again, they haven't reached it yet. But love remains in both. So, but the idea again being that actually hope is really something to be transcended. It's really something, even for a system which praises hope, it's actually recognized, as like, well, this is actually a temporary means, because really hope is not actually satisfying. Hope is actually something that comes from someone who hasn't experienced the results yet. It comes from someone who has a need to rely on the future. And in Buddhism, I think we would recognize that, that's not the point of Buddhism, actually. The point of Buddhism is not to hope for the future, as Venerable Soma was pointing to. It's actually to give up the future, not to expect a future, because craving is really always pertaining to the future. It's some kind of movement towards the future. And there's a sutta, a verse, where the Buddha is conversing with a Brahmin, and the Brahmin says, King nisita isayo manuja katiya brahmana devatanang yanyamaka being so putudaloke. So he says, depending on what do the sages and Brahmins, priests, and so on, essentially, why do they make different offerings, sacrifices to the gods? And the Buddha says, asing samana punakaita bhavang. So they're hoping for some kind of life, hoping for life here, hoping for existence here. Jarang sita yanyamaka being. So they make sacrifices, they perform sacrifices depending on old age. So it's almost the same idea of like, it's so hard to give up. Why do people perform so many religious things? So if you see someone performing a sacrifice, doing pujas, doing offerings, doing worship, often it's actually tainted by this hope for life, this hope for existence, this hope for a better future, this fear of old age, this fear of sickness, this fear of the current present situation, the fear of existential peril. And so it's almost like, oh, I want to do it so I can get some nice things in the future. I want to get it so I can go to heaven. I want to get it so I can live longer. I want to do it. So there's always motivated, even spiritual pursuits are often motivated by these subtle defilements, right? So they're not something coarse. Like, this is not something like breaking the precepts, right? This is something, the Buddha is speaking on a higher level here about something that is an obstacle to ending craving, an obstacle to attaining awakening. And how it's so hard, right? It's not easy to not do those, to not hope for gain, to not hope for future. And then similarly, the Brahmin then asks them, well, those people who perform all those different sacrifices, who do those different duties, are they able to be free from rebirth and old age? And the Buddha says, asing santi, tomayanti, abhijapanti, juhanti, kama abhijapanti, paticca labhang. So he's saying, like, paraphrasing here, basically like hoping and praying and praising and so on, that they pray for sensual pleasures based off the sensual pleasures that they have. So like when you think of someone who is doing a sacrifice in order to get future things, like, oh, maybe they make an offering so that in the future they can have a lot of candy, or they make an offering so that in heaven they can live long and eat a bunch of pasta. And you think, well, they get a bunch of pasta in this life, like they work hard to get those sensual pleasures just so that they can offer them to get them more in the future. And the Buddha is basically saying, like, no, how could that possibly lead to freedom? You're using sensual pleasures that you like in order to offer them to get more of those in the future. So it's just this cycle of hoping, this cycle of acquiring and then using what you've got just to get more of it in the future. And so it's very difficult. It's like a trap of we get what we want and then we want to use that to get more and so on. So it relates to the hoarding that we spoke about before. And I think that, that kind of subtle difficulty that we can look in ourselves. And one thing that can be helpful to think about it is another sutta called the Dana Mahapala Sutta, the great benefits of giving. And in that sutta, the Buddha talks about how giving is always beneficial. It's always beautiful, at least if it's a wholesome type of giving, right? Not like giving someone a punch in the face or something, but if you are giving something with the intention of actual, pure generosity, then it can actually be motivated by different things. And one of the motivations that the Buddha says is someone who gives thinking, I'll get something back from them. It's like maybe you give someone $20, you think, nice, maybe in the future they're going to give me $25. Or you give someone, like you cook them a dinner and you think next time they're going to offer me lunch. Or so you make a gift and it's a genuine gift, but you do it for expecting something. And the Buddha says that's wonderful, that's good. I can't say exactly actually what he says. But he says it's still good. It is still giving, but it's not the best. And the best giving is the giving actually of a non-returner. So giving as a factor of the path. And one way of relating to that is someone who gives a gift specifically with that intention of, as was mentioned before, letting go, like specifically to cultivate what the Buddha calls the third noble truth, right? Chago, letting go, patinisago, relinquishing, mutti, releasing, analio, not sticking to things. So it's like, why do you give? Not even to get a heavenly rebirth, not even to get a happy mind. You give just to let go, just because letting go is a training and adornment for the mind that moves it in that direction of letting go, moves it in that direction of relinquishing. And so when we do gifts, when we do things that we know, actually, like you have the teachings of karma, right? You have the teachings like, oh, you can actually get wealth by doing good deeds. You can actually get long life, right? When we do blessing chants, we say, Ayudo, balado, tiro, valado, patibhanado. So the one who gives life, the one who gives happiness, they receive happiness. And I actually heard, I think maybe it was Bhante G once or another monk who was saying, like when you're chanting, no, actually, I think it was a Burmese monk speaking to Burmese people who are very generous often, right? Buddhist people, often very generous. And he was basically saying like the verses are like tantalizing your greed, like, yeah, I'm hoping all the wonderful things are going to get, like, yes, heaven, pleasures, life, yes, tell us about all the... So obviously, like, that's a very advanced teaching, because if you go around telling like a bunch of stingy people, like, yeah, you shouldn't give because it's so greedy, you're just expecting heaven or whatever, then actually they would become less generous. But for people who are generous, then you can reflect on yourself and you can think like, well, how can I elevate my generosity? How can I make it even higher, right? And you can think like, oh yeah, am I hoping with my generosity to get something back? Am I hoping to live longer? Am I hoping to get something out of it? Or am I hoping to get, what do I want to get out of this generosity? Ideally, what we want to get out of it is just letting go, not actually something in return. And so, yeah, that subtle practice there, which you can maybe try to incorporate.
Sadhu, thank you very much. All right, and now we have a few comments and questions. So Bhavani is asking, how is my mother and how is the monastery in Italy? My mother is doing all right, stable, a little slightly better. And the monastery, thank you for asking. And the monastery in Italy is currently a nice forest with nothing on it, off the grid. There's just a little structure in the middle, and so it's proceeding, good practice. I'm just currently here for a few days, and then I'll have to return back. All right, and TJ says, how rare is it to meet the true Dhamma or have the opportunity to awaken at least temporarily?
Well, this isn't really on the topic of any of the suttas that we talked about.
I think rarity, the rare things.
Oh, yeah, it's very rare.
Yep, that's right. There are two rare things.
We can add a third one.
Yeah. And Etienne says, hi all, much metta to you as well, Etienne. And Kumu says, is hope for longevity not good if one is wishing longevity and health in this human birth to strive harder to move forward on the path, as one can do that only as a human being? Bhante?
Well, the thing is, then you're not hoping for longevity for its own sake. Rather, what you're doing is that you're hoping to make progress on the path. And that's the important thing. So actually the aspiration to make is, may I progress towards awakening, no matter what conditions that involves. Like not saying like, well, may I progress towards awakening, but I have to live at least 95 years old, and I want to live in Japan, and I want to have these kinds of friends, and I want to eat sushi every day. Like, well, you don't put all these like random specifications on it. I would personally be totally fine if I died tomorrow, as long as I was awakened. So wishing for long life is beside the point. Long life is not necessarily going to be a factor for awakening. So rather, set your intention on cultivating the factors of awakening rather than on longevity. Longevity itself is not a factor of awakening. So focus your aspirations on cultivating factors of awakening, because that's what you actually need.
Well, that would be very suitable to if you died tomorrow, Bante, because it's your birthday. So,
That's true. That would be appropriate.
So
If you were
awakened.
awakened.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be suitable if you died tomorrow. We don't want Monday to die. I'm not suggesting that.
Yes. Awakened, it would be a really great birthday.
Well, actually, even if you were awakened Monday, please stick around for as long as possible.
But definitely you would, you would get a nice birthday present. But if that doesn't happen, actually Mary sent you a birthday present.
Oh, okay.
She says, so Modernity. Yeah, sometimes when you're ESL, funny things come out of the mouth.
Also, when you're EFL.
English is the first language.
Yeah.
Okay. And Amaranta says, good evening, Venerables. It is great to see you together today. I went to visit the graveyard of a friend since I could not have the opportunity to go to his funeral. Their relatives and friends are still very affected and made me think about death and preparations we need to do before our death. Do you recommend some suttas and meditations? I have some restlessness since that visit to my friend.
Okay, well, maybe Amaranta, you could also bring this to monk chat, just because I think probably here we won't be able to address it in full detail, but I'm sure it's a difficult situation. So maybe in brief, some things that come to mind are actually relating to longevity. And what Bhante Sudasa was just talking about is that actually when you encounter death, you can also treat it, this is what the Buddha calls a divine messenger, right? And this is a message from heaven, an angel. So you can actually think like, how can I use this in the best way to contemplate that I also will die, that I too must die, and that everyone I love must die. And you might think, well, that's the opposite of what I want to do. But actually from a Buddhist perspective, and you've been joining the live stream for a long time, Amaranta, so I think that you would understand that actually it's a great opportunity to contemplate death, especially when someone close to you or close to your friends passes on. And so you can do meditations on death. You can reflect like, oh, I am of the same nature. And reflect like, oh, this person, these are my friends that lost someone they love. So it's so close to me. So it very easily could turn into someone in my family, very easily could turn into myself and my family. And then remembering death like that. And then that meditation is, although it can be frightening, it's also supposed to bring your mind to a state of letting go, bring your mind to a state of recognizing impermanence, that you have to let go of these things, whether you like it or not. So if you let go of them beforehand, then actually there's not really much of a problem, in the sense that when naturally the time comes, then you won't be disturbed. If you don't let go of them beforehand, then you can think all these disturbing emotions you're experiencing now, they'll be at least the same, if not worse, right? So just, reflecting on death in that way as a Buddhist practitioner, reflecting on it in a way to bring some peace to your mind. And maybe specific suttas on death, I would maybe recommend maybe you could look up recollection of death in the suttas and find the Buddha's instructions on recollection of death. And of course, there's the Satipatthana Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 10, for example, has the contemplations of the corpse and also the contemplation of the parts of the body. So contemplating that the body is of the nature to die, and that the body is also made of different organs, which are not actually inherently clean or pure or attractive. And you can also contemplate, like, yes, when we get old and when we die, this is expressing both the nature of the body and then the nature of life. And so reflecting on that in that way, you can hopefully find some peace and relief.
Sato. And Christina is asking a question that is probably more suitable for monk chat. How does one give up greed, aversion, and delusion by contemplating the elements? So yes, tomorrow evening we'll have monk chat, and that would be a perfect question for that. So I think for now it's all. Thank you so much for joining the live stream, and we can end with 3 sadhus. Thanks to all, also the Venerables, for all of your beautiful reflections.
Thanks.
Sadhu,